"Ma'am, I need you to step out of your seat," the flight attendant said, her voice cold and accusing. Naomi Carter froze, feeling every eye in the cabin turn toward her. Step out? Why? She had done nothing wrong, but in that moment she knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Something much bigger was about to unfold. Before we start the story, comment below and tell us where you're watching from today. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe for more. Naomi Carter adjusted her blazer as she stepped onto the plane. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she moved through the first-class cabin. Traveling in luxury wasn't new to her. She had worked hard to earn this. Years of long nights, bold decisions, and strategic thinking had built her a reputation as one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the tech industry. Yet, even as she settled into the plush leather seat, placing her designer handbag beneath her chair, she couldn't shake the tension she felt in the air. Something felt off, though she couldn't place it. She pulled out her tablet to review notes for an upcoming meeting. She was heading to an important pitch in Chicago, one that could secure her company a major government contract. This was just another step in the empire she was building. But as she scanned her notes, a shadow loomed over her. She looked up to see a flight attendant staring down at her with a tight-lipped smile. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice overly polite but her tone sharp. "May I see your boarding pass?" Naomi raised an eyebrow, momentarily caught off guard. She reached into her blazer pocket and handed the boarding pass to the woman. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Linda Parker, studied the pass longer than necessary. Her lips pursed as though she had found something wrong. "This is a first-class ticket," Linda remarked, her voice filled with doubt. Naomi tilted her head slightly, keeping her composure. "Yes, it is. Is there a problem?" Linda's forced smile faltered. She handed the boarding pass back, but leaned in slightly as she spoke. "We get mix-ups sometimes. I just needed to make sure everything was in order." Her tone had an edge, one that didn't go unnoticed by Naomi. Naomi's face remained calm, but her gut told her this wasn't just a routine check. Linda's words weren't laced with professionalism. They carried something uglier beneath the surface. Naomi simply nodded and returned her focus to her tablet, choosing to let it slide. It wasn't worth the energy, but Linda didn't move on. She lingered for a moment, looking at Naomi as though she didn't belong there. Then, with a barely audible mutter, "First class sure isn't what it used to be," she turned sharply and walked away. Naomi froze, her fingers tightening on the tablet. She had dealt with these subtle digs before, the comments that weren't direct but carried the sting of bias. Normally she brushed them off. She had worked too hard to let people like this pull her down. But something about Linda's tone, her audacity to make that remark so openly, struck a nerve. Naomi glanced around, noticing a few passengers nearby who had overheard. Some avoided her gaze while others gave her sympathetic looks but said nothing. Taking a deep breath, Naomi leaned back into her seat. She told herself to focus on the pitch, on the bigger picture. Yet, as the plane filled with passengers and the overhead compartments clicked shut, she couldn't fully relax. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Linda pacing up and down the aisle, her gaze occasionally flicking in Naomi's direction. It wasn't subtle. When the cabin doors closed, Naomi adjusted her seatbelt and prepared for the flight. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and announcing the flight time to Chicago. Naomi tried to focus on the hum of the engines, but her peace was short-lived. Barely 15 minutes into the flight, Linda returned, this time carrying a clipboard. Her smile was gone, replaced by a cold, authoritative look. "Miss Carter," she said curtly, "we need to have a word about your seat." Naomi looked up from her tablet. "What about it?" "There seems to have been a mistake with your ticket. This seat wasn't meant to be assigned," Linda said, her words clipped. "We'll need to move you to another section." Naomi's brow furrowed. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out the boarding pass again. "This ticket is valid. I paid for this seat." Linda sighed dramatically, as though Naomi were being unreasonable. "Mistakes happen. I'm just trying to resolve this quietly." Naomi's voice remained calm, but her patience was wearing thin. "And I'm telling you, there is no mistake. If there is, it's on your end. I'm not moving." Passengers nearby began to turn their heads, sensing the tension. The man in the adjacent seat lowered his newspaper, watching the exchange with curiosity. Naomi noticed a few murmurs ripple through the cabin, but Linda seemed unfazed. Her knuckles tightened around the clipboard as she leaned closer. "Miss Carter," Linda said in a low voice, "let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Naomi held her gaze, refusing to budge. "The only person making this hard is you. Now, unless there's a legitimate issue, I suggest you let me enjoy my flight." Linda straightened abruptly, her face flushed with frustration. She glanced down the aisle as though looking for backup. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed off toward the galley. Naomi exhaled slowly, her heart pounding despite her calm exterior. She noticed the stares of the other passengers, some wide-eyed, others indifferent. This wasn't the first time she had been treated like this, but the blatant nature of it, the public humiliation, left her simmering. Still, she told herself to stay composed. She had a meeting to prepare for, and this flight was just a minor inconvenience. But deep down, Naomi knew this wasn't over. Naomi tried to refocus her attention on the tablet, scrolling through her notes with deliberate intent, but the encounter lingered in her mind. She had spent years ignoring situations like this, brushing them off to avoid confrontation, but Linda's behavior was something different, brazen, unapologetic, and public. Her instincts told her there was more to come. Her suspicions were confirmed when Linda returned a few minutes later, flanked by a younger flight attendant who looked visibly uncomfortable. The younger woman avoided Naomi's gaze, clutching the edge of the clipboard Linda had handed her. Linda's smug expression had returned, but this time it was tinged with something more deliberate, as though she had already decided how this interaction would play out. "Miss Carter," Linda began, her tone now louder, ensuring nearby passengers could hear. "As I mentioned earlier, there's been an issue with your ticket. We've checked with corporate, and it seems this seat was flagged due to an internal error." Naomi set her tablet down slowly, her eyes narrowing. "An error," she repeated, her voice calm but firm. "That's interesting, considering I've flown with this airline before and never had any errors with my first-class tickets." Linda's smile tightened, her confidence faltering for a split second. "Well, mistakes happen, and we need to address them when they do. To make things easier for everyone, we've arranged for you to move to a seat in the main cabin." Naomi leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms. "I won't be moving to the main cabin. I paid for this seat, and unless you can provide a valid reason backed by evidence, I'll be staying right here." The tension in the cabin thickened as passengers leaned in closer to listen. The man across the aisle raised his eyebrows, clearly intrigued. A woman 2 rows back whispered something to her seatmate, who nodded discreetly. The pressure seemed to irritate Linda further, and her voice rose. "You people always make things more difficult than they need to be," she snapped under her breath, her tone dripping with condescension. Naomi's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, what do you mean by you people?" Linda's eyes widened slightly, realizing she had let her guard down. She quickly masked her reaction, waving her hand dismissively. "I didn't mean anything by it. Let's not make this a bigger issue than it has to be." Naomi's calm exterior cracked, her voice sharpening. "The issue isn't me, Linda. It's the fact that you've singled me out and are now trying to remove me from a seat I rightfully paid for. You haven't questioned anyone else in this cabin, just me." Linda's face flushed red, but she pressed on, leaning closer, as if trying to intimidate Naomi. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have no choice but to involve security. Is that what you want?" Before Naomi could respond, the younger flight attendant stepped forward, her voice trembling. I think there's been some misunderstanding." Linda cut her off sharply. "Stay out of this," she hissed. The younger woman shrank back, clutching the clipboard like a lifeline. Naomi stood her ground, her tone unwavering. "You want to call security? Go ahead. Let's see how far you're willing to escalate this over a valid ticket. But let me warn you, This will not end well for you." A few passengers gasped softly at Naomi's boldness. The man across the aisle chuckled under his breath, clearly enjoying the unfolding drama. Linda hesitated, her expression wavering between anger and uncertainty. She took a step back, clutching the clipboard tightly, before turning abruptly and marching back down the aisle toward the galley. Naomi exhaled, glancing around the cabin. A few passengers gave her encouraging nods while others quickly looked away. She could feel her pulse in her ears, but she forced herself to relax. This wasn't the first time she had faced such treatment, but something about the brazenness of Linda's actions told her this was different. And if Linda thought she could intimidate her into submission, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. Naomi tried to calm her nerves, but the unease in the cabin was palpable. She noticed Linda pacing in the galley, speaking in hushed tones with another flight attendant. They both glanced toward Naomi's row, and though Naomi couldn't hear their words, their body language made it clear the issue was far from over. Moments later, a passenger seated in the coach section slipped his phone into the gap between the curtains separating first class. He had been recording since Linda's initial confrontation, his instincts telling him this incident could turn into something bigger. His name was Ethan Reynolds, an aspiring journalist always on the lookout for stories of injustice. What he saw and heard from his seat had been enough to make him hit record, and he wasn't about to stop. Naomi noticed Ethan's subtle movements but said nothing. She appreciated the quiet allyship. For now, her focus remained on Linda, who seemed to be gearing up for another round. Sure enough, Linda returned, her face pinched with forced calm, and this time, she wasn't alone. The captain followed close behind, his face marked with irritation. He looked like a man who had been pulled into a situation he wanted no part of. Linda stepped aside, letting him take the lead. "Miss Carter," he said, his tone firm but professional. "I understand there's been some confusion about your seat." Naomi stayed seated, her gaze unwavering. "There's no confusion, Captain. I paid for this seat, and I have a valid boarding pass to prove it." The captain glanced at Linda, who handed him the clipboard. He scanned the document before looking back at Naomi. "It seems there's been a discrepancy flagged in our system regarding your ticket. To ensure a smooth flight for all passengers, I'd appreciate your cooperation in relocating to another seat." Naomi felt the weight of every gaze in the cabin. She could hear the murmurs of passengers, some whispering their support, while others muttered about staying out of it. The captain's attempt at diplomacy didn't fool her. This was about appeasing Linda, not resolving the situation fairly. "With all due respect, Captain," Naomi said, her voice steady but sharp. "The only discrepancy here is the way your flight attendant has treated me. She's harassed me from the moment I boarded this plane. I've been patient, but I won't be moved to accommodate her prejudice." The captain shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the growing audience. "Miss Carter, I'm asking for your cooperation to avoid further escalation." Naomi's tone turned icy. "And I'm refusing to cooperate with blatant discrimination. If you feel the need to escalate this, by all means proceed. But understand this. I'll be documenting every second of it, and so will others." She gestured subtly toward Ethan's phone, which was now visible to both the captain and Linda. Linda's face darkened at the sight of the recording device. "You can't record without permission," she snapped, glaring at Ethan. "It's a public flight," Ethan replied smoothly, his voice loud enough for others to hear. "And I've got every right to document what I'm witnessing." The captain sighed heavily, clearly caught in an uncomfortable position. "Linda," he said, his voice low, "let's discuss this in the galley." Linda's lips thinned, but she complied, shooting Naomi one last glare before stalking off. The captain followed, leaving the cabin in a tense silence. Naomi leaned back in her seat, her heart still racing. She noticed the encouraging glances from a few passengers, including the woman 2 rows back who had been quietly observing since the beginning. The woman gave Naomi a small, supportive nod, and Naomi returned it with a faint smile. The fight wasn't over, but Naomi could already sense the tide beginning to shift. She wasn't alone in this. From the coach section, Ethan checked the recording on his phone. He muttered to himself, "This is going viral the moment we land." The cabin remained tense as murmurs rippled through the rows. Naomi noticed some passengers exchanging uneasy glances, while others whispered animatedly, clearly torn between staying neutral and expressing their discomfort with what they'd witnessed. She kept her eyes on the front of the cabin, waiting for the inevitable. It didn't take long. Linda reappeared, her expression unreadable, but her brisk steps betrayed her frustration. The captain followed close behind, his face grim. This time, Linda wasn't carrying the clipboard. Instead, she stood tall, hands on her hips as though preparing for battle. Naomi sat upright, her posture firm and resolute, refusing to show any signs of intimidation. The captain spoke first. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice quieter but no less insistent. "After further review, it seems there may have been an issue with how the ticket was processed. While we understand your concerns, I must insist that you move to another seat. This is the final request." The finality in his tone caused a ripple of reaction throughout the cabin. Passengers exchanged looks, some shaking their heads, while others leaned in closer, clearly eager to see what Naomi would do. Naomi took a measured breath before speaking. "Captain, let me be very clear. I'm not moving. I purchased this seat. I have the documentation to prove it, and I have no intention of being bullied out of it because your flight attendant has decided I don't belong here." Linda's face reddened, and her composure cracked. "This isn't about bullying," she snapped. "It's about following procedures and making sure everyone is where they're supposed to be." Naomi turned her head sharply to face Linda, her calm demeanor now laced with fire. "If that's the case, then why haven't you questioned anyone else in this cabin? Why was I the only person whose ticket you felt the need to double-check? And why am I the only one you're trying to move?" Linda opened her mouth to respond, but faltered. Her eyes darted around the cabin, searching for an ally among the passengers. What she found instead was the growing discomfort of people who had been quietly watching. A voice broke through the uneasy silence. "She's right," said the woman 2 rows back. Her tone was soft but firm. "I've been watching this whole time. You singled her out the moment she stepped on this plane. It's not right." Linda spun toward the woman, her anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "This has nothing to do with anyone else," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm just doing my job." "Then do it fairly," the woman countered, "because it sure doesn't look like that's what's happening here." A few passengers murmured their agreement, and Linda's face flushed even deeper. She looked to the captain for support, but his silence spoke volumes. The tide was turning against her, and she knew it. Naomi seized the moment. "Captain," she said, her voice steady but commanding, "if you're as committed to ensuring a smooth flight as you claim, I suggest you handle this situation professionally. This has gone far beyond a seating issue. This is harassment, and I won't tolerate it." The captain sighed, clearly weary of the escalating conflict. He held up a hand to silence Linda, who was visibly seething. "Let me consult with ground control," he said reluctantly. "We'll decide how to proceed from there." As he turned to leave, Linda stepped forward, lowering her voice but ensuring Naomi could hear her. "You people always have to make everything a spectacle." Naomi's blood ran cold at the words. Her eyes locked onto Linda's, and for the first time her voice hardened with unrestrained anger. "Say that again," she said, her tone low and dangerous. Linda's confidence wavered, but she doubled down, whispering venomously, "You heard me." Naomi leaned forward slightly, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "You've made a serious mistake, and you're going to regret it. I promise you that." Linda opened her mouth to retort, but was interrupted by a commotion from the coach section. Ethan, no longer content to stay hidden, stepped through the curtain, his phone raised. "It's all on video," he said loudly. "Every single word. Every passenger here is a witness, and the world's going to see exactly what's happening." The cabin erupted into murmurs as passengers craned their necks to get a look. Linda froze, her face pale. The captain, who had stopped mid-step, turned back toward the scene, his expression a mix of frustration and alarm. Naomi didn't say another word. She simply leaned back in her seat, her gaze steady and unwavering. Linda's smugness was gone now, replaced with something Naomi recognized well: fear. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone in the cabin could feel it. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. This was about something much bigger. The captain's voice came over the intercom a few moments later, crackling with strained composure. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Please remain seated as we work to resolve an issue. Thank you for your patience." Naomi's patience, however, was wearing thin. She noticed Linda pacing in the galley, her movements erratic as she whispered furiously into a phone. Occasionally, Linda's eyes darted toward Naomi, her face a mix of frustration and apprehension. Whatever Linda was saying, Naomi could tell she was struggling to maintain control of the situation. Meanwhile, Ethan had returned to his seat in the coach section, his phone still recording. Passengers in his row leaned toward him, whispering questions about what had happened. Ethan nodded toward Naomi's seat and said just loud enough to be overheard, "This isn't the first time people like her have been treated this way. The difference is, this time, it's all on camera." The words traveled through the cabin like wildfire. Naomi caught snippets of conversations, some voices expressing outrage, others muttering indifference or quiet support for Linda. One voice, however, cut through the rest. "This is ridiculous," a middle-aged man in a business suit scoffed from across the aisle. "Can we just get on with the flight? She's probably just trying to make a scene for attention." Naomi turned her head slowly toward the man, her gaze sharp enough to cut through steel. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but pointed. The man shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I'm just saying, people love to make everything about themselves these days." Naomi inhaled deeply, biting back the anger that threatened to rise. She was done justifying her existence to people like him. "If you had been singled out and humiliated for no reason, I doubt you'd stay quiet," she said evenly. "But please enjoy your flight. This won't take much longer." Her response earned a soft murmur of agreement from a few passengers. The man didn't reply, instead sinking further into his seat, his expression sour. The younger flight attendant, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, shuffled nervously down the aisle, stopping near Naomi's row. She leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry about all of this," she stammered. "I just want you to know I don't agree with what's happening." Naomi's eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. "If you don't agree, then why aren't you saying anything to her?" she asked, gesturing subtly toward Linda in the galley. The attendant's shoulders sagged. "It's not that simple. Linda, she's been here a long time. People are afraid of crossing her." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Afraid of her, or afraid of doing the right thing?" The attendant's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it, stepping back and hurrying toward the galley. Naomi sighed, her frustration mounting. This wasn't just about Linda. It was about a culture that allowed people like her to thrive unchecked. And that realization only strengthened Naomi's resolve. Minutes passed before the captain reappeared, walking briskly up the aisle. He stopped near Naomi's seat, his expression tight. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice lower this time. "I've spoken with ground control, and we've reviewed the situation. To avoid further delays and disruption, we're going to have you removed from this flight." The words hit Naomi like a blow, but she refused to let it show. "You're removing me?" she asked, her voice sharp. "For sitting in the seat I paid for?" "I'm asking you to cooperate," the captain replied, glancing nervously at the other passengers who were now openly watching. "This situation has gotten out of hand, and I need to ensure the safety and comfort of everyone on board." Naomi stood, her movements deliberate and calm. Her voice, however, carried the weight of her anger. "Let's be clear. The only safety and comfort being protected here is hers." She pointed toward Linda, who stood frozen near the galley, her face pale. You're choosing to side with discrimination instead of doing what's right." The captain didn't respond. His jaw tightened as he gestured toward the door. "Please, Miss Carter." Naomi held her head high as she reached for her bag. She noticed the flash of Ethan's phone as he recorded her every move. As she stepped into the aisle, whispers followed her, some sympathetic, others indifferent. One voice, the woman 2 rows back, rang out clearly. "This is wrong and everyone here knows it." Naomi gave her a small nod of gratitude before turning toward the exit. As she passed Linda, she stopped, her voice quiet but laced with steel. "You've made a mistake, and you'll regret it." Linda didn't respond, her face a mixture of fear and defiance. Naomi continued down the aisle and out the plane door, her steps steady despite the anger and humiliation coursing through her. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Naomi stepped off the jet bridge into the terminal, her pulse still pounding in her ears. The humiliation of being removed from the plane lingered in her chest, heavy and suffocating. Passengers who had witnessed the incident shuffled past her, some averting their eyes while others glanced at her with quiet sympathy. Naomi ignored them, her focus sharp and unyielding. She wasn't thinking about the embarrassment anymore. She was thinking about what came next. Her phone buzzed in her hand as she walked toward the nearest seating area. It was her assistant, Michelle. Naomi picked up immediately. "Naomi, are you okay?" Michelle's voice was a mix of concern and urgency. "I just saw a video, it's already online. Someone posted it and it's spreading like wildfire." Naomi sank into a seat by the window, her grip tightening around the phone. "Send it to me," she said evenly. Her calm voice didn't betray the fire building inside her. Moments later, Michelle forwarded the link. Naomi clicked it open, and there it was. The entire incident captured from the moment Linda questioned her ticket to the moment the captain asked her to leave. The footage wasn't shaky or blurry. It was clear and damning. Ethan Reynolds had done his job well. Naomi scrolled through the comments, each one fueling her determination. "This is disgusting. That flight attendant needs to be fired. Another case of someone being targeted for no reason. This has to stop. She handled that with so much class. I would have lost it. The airline better fix this or I'm never flying with them again." She exhaled slowly, then typed a quick message to Michelle. "Call my lawyer. Now." As she sat there, Naomi's mind began working in overdrive. She thought of every lesson she had learned in the corporate world, every time she had fought her way into rooms where no one wanted her. This wouldn't be swept under the rug. Linda Parker and that airline were about to learn who they were dealing with. Her thoughts were interrupted when Ethan appeared at the corner of her vision, phone still in hand. He hesitated, likely unsure if she'd want to speak to him. Naomi gave him a nod, signaling for him to approach. "Miss Carter," Ethan began cautiously, sitting in the seat next to her. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I got it all on camera. The video's already trending." Naomi looked at him, appreciating his sincerity. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "You did the right thing." Ethan nodded. "People are angry. They're demanding the airline respond. What's your next move?" Naomi's gaze shifted toward the tarmac outside the window where planes taxied to and from the gates. Her expression sharpened. "I'm going to make sure they don't get away with this." Ethan leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Naomi turned to look at him, her lips curving into the faintest hint of a smile. "They think they can treat me like this because I'm just one person on a plane. What they don't realize is that I'm not just a passenger. I'm someone with power, and I intend to use it." Ethan blinked, taken aback by her words. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Naomi stood up, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Thanks for the footage, Ethan. Keep an eye on your inbox. You'll want to see where this goes." With that, Naomi strode toward the terminal exit, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She wasn't sure how yet, but she knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just about a seat or a rude flight attendant. This was about power, accountability, and justice. And she wasn't leaving the battlefield until she won. Her phone buzzed again as she stepped outside into the sunlit parking area. It was Michelle. "Your lawyer's on standby," Michelle said, and I did a little digging. Apparently the airline's struggling financially. They're losing investors and cutting corners to survive. Naomi's lips curled into a small, satisfied smile. "Good," she said softly, "because I just decided I'm going to buy the airline." "Wait, what?" Michelle blurted out, her voice stunned. "You heard me," Naomi replied as she unlocked her car. "Start making calls. I want every detail about their financials, their ownership, and their largest shareholders. If they think I don't belong in first class, I'll show them what happens when you underestimate me." Naomi ended the call and sat behind the wheel, staring straight ahead. The humiliation she had endured still stung, but it wasn't going to define her. She had spent her life turning obstacles into stepping stones. Linda Parker and that airline had just given her the perfect opportunity to do it again. "This is far from over," Naomi whispered to herself, a steely determination in her voice. "Let's see how they handle me now." Naomi spent the next 24 hours in full work mode. She barely slept, fueled by coffee, anger, and the determination to take control of the situation. Her office turned into a war room, the large wooden desk covered with financial reports, legal briefs, and notes scribbled on yellow pads. Michelle sat across from her, phone in hand, fielding calls and relaying updates in real time. Naomi's lawyer, Mark Jensen, joined the operation remotely, providing strategy and legal advice as they pieced everything together. "They're in trouble, Naomi," Mark said over the video call, his voice calm but laced with excitement. "The airline's stock has been dropping steadily over the last 2 quarters. They've been losing investors, and their operations are stretched thin. If you make the right move, you can take a controlling share." Naomi leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she processed the information. "What's the price tag?" she asked, her voice sharp and focused. "Right now, you could make a bid for a significant stake for far less than what the company was worth a year ago," Mark replied. "They're vulnerable, especially with the public backlash from the video. Their PR team is scrambling, but it's not enough to stop the damage. Shareholders are starting to panic." Michelle chimed in, flipping through her notes. "We've already had 3 private investors reach out, saying they're ready to sell their shares. They don't want to stay tied to this mess." Naomi's lips curled into a determined smile. "Good. Let's strike while the iron's hot. Mark, draft the acquisition plan. I want it ready to send to their board by the end of the day." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You're really doing this?" "I don't make empty promises," Naomi replied coolly. "This isn't just about me anymore. They thought I didn't belong in first class. Now I'm going to make sure they know exactly who they kicked off that plane." As the hours ticked by, Naomi's team worked tirelessly to gather everything they needed. Michelle coordinated with bankers and financial advisors, ensuring they had the funding lined up for the bid. Mark handled the legal framework, preparing Naomi's formal offer for the airline's board. Meanwhile, the video of Naomi's removal continued to spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up, replaying the footage of Linda's condescending remarks and Naomi's calm defiance. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like #Justice for Naomi and #Boycott the airline, with thousands of users demanding accountability. The airline's attempts to issue carefully worded apologies only fueled the outrage. Every comment and every headline seemed to hit harder than the last. "Enough is enough. This is more than a mistake. If you treat paying customers this way, you deserve to lose business. Naomi Carter is my hero, grace under pressure, and now she's fighting back." By the evening, Naomi sat in her office reviewing the finalized acquisition plan Mark had sent over. Michelle handed her a steaming cup of tea, clearly impressed with how far they'd come in such a short time. "This is it," Michelle said, watching Naomi sign the documents with steady hands. "Do you think they'll see this coming?" Naomi looked up, her eyes blazing with quiet confidence. "They're too busy trying to cover their tracks to realize I'm playing a different game." Moments later, Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "It's sent. The board will receive the offer within the hour." Naomi exhaled, finally allowing herself a moment to sit back and reflect. The weight of everything that had happened, the humiliation, the anger, the sense of being so blatantly targeted, still sat heavy in her chest. But now it carried a new energy, one that fueled her mission. Linda Parker and the airline had underestimated her, but Naomi was about to show them what true power looked like. "They're not ready for this," she muttered to herself, her voice quiet but resolute. Across the city, the airline's board members received Naomi's offer one by one, their inboxes lighting up with the unexpected bid. The proposal came with clean numbers, financial stability, and a sharp reminder of the PR disaster currently unfolding. The CEO, Mark Thompson, stared at his screen in disbelief as the reality set in. "Who the hell is Naomi Carter?" he demanded aloud, his voice echoing in the empty boardroom. An assistant nearby replied nervously, "She's the woman we kicked off the flight yesterday, sir." Thompson's face paled as he sat back in his chair, staring at the acquisition offer in disbelief. For the first time, he realized just how badly they had miscalculated. Naomi Carter wasn't a disgruntled passenger. She was the storm heading straight for them. The airline boardroom was in chaos the next morning. Mark Thompson, the CEO, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his knuckles white as he gripped Naomi's acquisition offer. Papers were scattered in front of him, reports from PR teams and financial advisors painting a grim picture of the airline's current situation. The board members murmured to each other, clearly rattled by the proposal. "Who does she think she is?" one director barked, slamming a fist on the table. "Some tech entrepreneur thinks she can buy her way out of a grudge? This is a stunt." "It's not a stunt," another member said quietly, pushing his glasses up his nose as he reviewed the numbers. "Her offer is legitimate. More than that, it's generous. With the mess we're in, we might not get a better deal." Thompson glared at him. "We're not handing the company over because of one viral video." "Have you seen the stock prices this morning?" the man countered, sliding a report down the table. "We're down another 8% overnight. Investors are panicking, customers are canceling flights, and the media won't let up. If we don't do something, there won't be a company left to save." The room fell silent. Thompson leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as the weight of the situation sank in. "Fine," he growled. "Let's open talks with her. Maybe we can renegotiate." Naomi sat in her sunlit office, sipping coffee as her phone buzzed with updates from Mark Jensen, her lawyer. "They're ready to meet," Mark said, his tone measured but satisfied. "They're trying to play tough, but the numbers don't lie. They're desperate." Naomi set her cup down and allowed a small smile. "Schedule the meeting for tomorrow morning. Let's see how serious they are." As she hung up, Michelle burst into the room, tablet in hand. "Naomi, you need to see this." She swiped the screen and turned it toward Naomi. A live news report was streaming. Breaking news. Meridian Airlines board is under pressure after a viral incident involving tech mogul Naomi Carter. Sources confirm that Carter has made an official bid to acquire a controlling stake in the airline. Experts say this move could reshape the company's future and send a strong message about accountability and discrimination in corporate spaces. Naomi watched the screen, her expression calm, though her mind was racing. She had made headlines before, but this was different. This wasn't about business. This was personal, and now the world was watching. "Do you think they'll cave?" Michelle asked, sitting across from her. "They don't have a choice," Naomi replied. "Their backs are against the wall. If they fight me, they'll lose even more credibility. If they cooperate, I can turn this mess into something better." "But what about Linda?" Michelle asked softly, hesitant to bring up the flight attendant who had started it all. "People will want to know what happens to her." Naomi's gaze sharpened. "Oh, they'll know. Trust me." The next morning, Naomi walked into the airline's sleek, glass-walled headquarters, with Mark and Michelle by her side. Heads turned as they passed, employees whispering in hushed tones, as the woman from the viral video made her way through the building like she owned it. Because soon, she would. In the boardroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mark Thompson sat at the head of the table, trying to project authority, but Naomi noticed the way he avoided her eyes. The rest of the board members were clearly uneasy, their postures stiff and defensive. "Miss Carter," Thompson began, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for joining us." Naomi took her seat across from him, her lawyer settling in beside her. She set a thick folder down on the table and looked straight at the CEO. "Let's cut the small talk, Mr. Thompson. I'm here to finalize terms." Thompson's smile faltered. "About your proposal, while we appreciate the offer, the board has concerns about—" "The concerns are irrelevant," Naomi interrupted, her tone firm but composed. "Your stock is plummeting. Your investors are jumping ship and your customers are losing trust in you by the second. I'm offering you a way out, a clean slate, a new direction. You'd be foolish not to take it." Thompson opened his mouth to argue, but Naomi pushed the folder across the table before he could speak. "Here's the deal," she continued. "I'll take a controlling stake in the company. Your shareholders get stability, your leadership gets to save face, and the public gets to see real accountability for what happened on that flight." "And what about Linda Parker?" a board member asked hesitantly. Naomi's eyes flashed. "She'll be terminated immediately, and an independent review of your entire staff will begin. Your culture allowed her behavior to go unchecked, and that will change under my leadership." The boardroom fell silent. Thompson looked around at his colleagues, searching for support, but found only resignation. They all knew Naomi had them cornered. After a long pause, he finally sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Fine," he muttered. "We'll accept your terms." Naomi's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good choice." An hour later, Naomi stepped out of the building, the wind whipping gently around her as Michelle and Mark followed close behind. Reporters had already gathered outside, their cameras flashing and microphones waving. "Miss Carter," one of them shouted, "is it true you're taking over the airline?" Naomi stopped and turned to face the crowd, her voice steady and clear. "Yes, I made an offer and it's been accepted. This isn't just about one flight attendant or one incident. This is about creating real change in an industry that desperately needs it. I won't stand for discrimination in any form, and neither should anyone else." The cameras clicked furiously as Naomi continued walking toward her car, her head held high. She could already picture the headlines. "Naomi Carter takes over, airline after viral incident." But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving a point. When you underestimate someone, you might just hand them the power to change everything. The takeover announcement sent shockwaves through the airline industry. News outlets ran the story non-stop, with pundits weighing in on what Naomi's acquisition meant for the future of Meridian Airlines. Some called it a bold move, a symbol of justice and accountability. Others dismissed it as a PR stunt, though their voices were drowned out by the overwhelming public support Naomi had garnered. Inside her office, Naomi sat with her team, laying out the next steps. The work wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. Her primary goal was clear: to clean house, starting with Linda Parker. "Has the termination paperwork been finalized?" Naomi asked, looking up from her laptop. Michelle nodded, sliding a folder across the desk. "Effective immediately. HR is handling it as we speak." "Good," Naomi replied, flipping through the document briefly before signing off on it. "I want her out by the end of the day." There was no satisfaction in Naomi's tone, only resolve. She wasn't interested in petty revenge. This was about accountability. Linda's behavior was a symptom of a larger problem, and Naomi intended to root it out completely. Meanwhile, Naomi's legal team had already begun drafting policies for the systemic changes she planned to implement. Mandatory diversity training, stronger anti-discrimination protocols, and an independent review board to oversee complaints were just the beginning. "We'll need to address the public directly about these changes," Naomi said, her voice firm. "This can't just be another corporate promise that gets swept under the rug. People need to see action." At the airline's headquarters, Linda Parker sat in a small office, staring blankly at the termination letter in her hands. The HR representative across from her droned on about severance and legal clauses, but Linda barely heard a word. Her career was over. The viral video had ruined her reputation, and now the company she'd worked for over a decade had thrown her under the bus. "This is a mistake," Linda muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "I was just doing my job." The HR rep gave her a tight-lipped smile, clearly uncomfortable. "We understand, but this decision is final. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." Linda's face burned with humiliation as she stuffed the letter into her bag and stormed out of the building. The murmurs of her former colleagues followed her as she left, their whispers a painful reminder of how far she had fallen. As Linda's departure rippled through the airline, Naomi held a press conference to outline her vision for the company. Cameras flashed as she stepped up to the podium, flanked by her legal and PR teams. She had traded her usual business attire for a sleek black suit that commanded attention. "Thank you all for being here," Naomi began, her voice steady and confident. "When I boarded that flight last week, I didn't expect to find myself standing here today. What happened to me was unacceptable, but it was also an opportunity to highlight something much bigger, a systemic problem that goes beyond one flight attendant or one airline." She paused, letting her words settle before continuing. "I'm not here to make excuses or shift blame. I'm here to make changes. Starting today, Meridian Airlines will adopt a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Every employee, from the flight crews to the executives, will undergo comprehensive diversity and inclusion training. We are also establishing an independent oversight board to handle customer complaints and ensure accountability at every level." The room buzzed with questions as reporters raised their hands, but Naomi wasn't finished. "I know this won't be easy, and I know it won't happen overnight. But I am committed to making Meridian Airlines a company that values every passenger and every employee equally. This isn't just about righting a wrong. It's about setting a new standard for the industry." The applause that followed was thunderous, a rare moment of public approval in a business world often marred by cynicism. Naomi stepped away from the podium, her head held high. She had made her message clear. She wasn't just taking over the airline, she was rebuilding it. In the days that followed, the reforms began to take shape. Employees were hesitant at first, wary of the sweeping changes Naomi implemented. But as training sessions rolled out and the independent review board was established, many began to see the value in her vision. Customers, too, noticed the shift, with some even praising the airline's newfound commitment to fairness and accountability. As Naomi walked through the airline's operations center one afternoon, she was stopped by a young employee, a baggage handler who had worked at the company for years. "Miss Carter," he said nervously, wiping his hands on his uniform, "I just wanted to say thank you. For everything you're doing, people like me, we've been ignored for a long time. It means a lot to see someone actually care." Naomi smiled warmly, shaking his hand. "Thank you," she replied. "This is just the beginning. There's still a lot of work to do." The employee nodded, his face lighting up with hope. Naomi watched him walk away, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She hadn't just bought an airline, she was transforming it, piece by piece, into something better. And she wasn't stopping until the job was done. Naomi's reforms quickly began to ripple across the industry, sparking conversations in boardrooms far beyond Meridian Airlines. Competitors took notice, with some scrambling to announce their own diversity initiatives, in what was clearly a reaction to Naomi's sweeping changes. But while the public largely embraced her efforts, not everyone was ready to move forward. A group of long-standing employees, including several senior managers, resisted the new policies. They grumbled about political correctness and whispered complaints about how Naomi's leadership was changing the company too much. The resistance culminated in a formal letter to the board, claiming that Naomi's policies were damaging employee morale. Naomi read the letter in her office, her expression unchanging as Michelle stood nearby, visibly fuming. "The audacity," Michelle spat. "After everything this company's been through, they're upset because they have to treat people with basic respect?" Naomi set the letter down, her calm demeanor masking the fire in her chest. "They don't understand yet," she said softly. "Change is hard, especially for people who've benefited from the old way of doing things. But that doesn't mean we stop." "Should we address it publicly?" Michelle asked. "No," Naomi replied firmly. "This isn't about giving them attention. It's about showing them, and everyone else, that the changes are here to stay. Let the results speak for themselves." Naomi's strategy soon paid off. Passenger satisfaction ratings, which had plummeted in the wake of the viral incident, began climbing steadily. Customers shared their positive experiences on social media, praising the more attentive service and improved atmosphere on flights. Employees who had initially been skeptical of Naomi's leadership started to warm up as they saw the benefits of the new policies. But Naomi wasn't satisfied with incremental progress. She wanted to cement these changes, to make them part of the company's DNA. She called an emergency board meeting to propose her next move: a complete rebranding of Meridian Airlines. When the board members filed into the conference room, they found Naomi standing at the head of the table, a sleek presentation screen behind her. The room buzzed with tension as the board settled into their seats. "Ladies and gentlemen," Naomi began, her voice steady but commanding, "Meridian Airlines has been in crisis. We've lost trust, we've lost customers, and we've lost the sense of pride that should come with being part of this company. It's time to change that." She clicked a button on the remote, and the screen lit up with the airline's familiar logo. "This brand represents the old Meridian," Naomi said, "the one that allowed discrimination, ignored complaints, and prioritized profits over people." With another click, the screen transitioned to a sleek new logo, a bold, modern design paired with the tagline, "Meridian, where everyone belongs." The room was silent as Naomi continued. "This isn't just about a new look. It's about a new commitment. A commitment to inclusivity, to fairness, and to being the airline people can trust again. This rebranding will reflect the changes we've already made and set the tone for everything we do moving forward." The board members exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement while others remained wary. Finally, one director spoke up. "This is bold, Naomi, but it's risky. A full rebrand could alienate some of our traditional customers." Naomi met his gaze, her voice unwavering. "Those traditional customers are the ones we've lost already. The ones still with us want to see us grow, and the ones we'll gain are the future of this company. This isn't just a rebrand, it's a reset." After a tense pause, the room erupted into murmurs of cautious approval. The board voted unanimously to move forward with Naomi's proposal, marking a turning point in the company's history. As the rebranding efforts rolled out, Naomi worked tirelessly to ensure every detail aligned with her vision. New uniforms were designed to reflect the airline's fresh start. Training programs were revamped to emphasize customer service and cultural awareness. Even the in-flight menus were updated, offering more diverse options to cater to passengers from around the world. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. News outlets hailed the rebrand as a masterstroke, while customers shared photos of the new planes and praised the airline's improved service. The hashtag #NewMeridian trended for days, with people celebrating Naomi's efforts to turn the company around. Naomi watched it all unfold from her office, a rare smile playing on her lips. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The company wasn't just recovering, it was thriving. And the message was clear. Meridian Airlines was no longer a company that tolerated prejudice. It was a company that led by example. But Naomi knew her work wasn't done. As she closed her laptop and gazed out the window at the city skyline, her thoughts turned to the future. The airline's transformation was just the beginning. There were other industries, other systems that needed to change. Naomi Carter had built her empire by turning challenges into opportunities. And now, with Meridian Airlines under her wing, she was ready to take on the next fight. While the rebranding gained momentum, and the public largely embraced the new Meridian, Naomi was acutely aware that not everyone was on board. Behind closed doors, a small faction within the company continued to resist. Some senior employees loyal to the old culture quietly sowed seeds of doubt, hoping to stall her reforms. Their whispers reached Naomi through indirect channels, and she knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move. The tipping point came during a quarterly performance review meeting. Naomi sat at the head of the table, flanked by her key advisors, while the senior management team presented updates on their respective departments. As the presentation progressed, the head of operations, a grizzled veteran named Frank Carter, no relation, cleared his throat and stood to speak. "Miss Carter," he began, his tone neutral but his words carefully chosen. "While I respect the changes you've implemented, I think it's important to recognize that not all employees feel comfortable with the new direction." Naomi tilted her head slightly, her sharp gaze fixed on him. "Uncomfortable with fairness and accountability, Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice calm but piercing. Frank shifted in his chair, clearly caught off guard by her directness. "It's not about fairness," he replied, choosing his words cautiously. "It's about maintaining the traditions and culture that have defined this company for decades. Rapid change can alienate employees who've dedicated their lives to Meridian." Naomi leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "The culture you're referring to is what led to discrimination and exclusion. Traditions that harm people have no place in this company, or any company. The employees who feel alienated by change are the ones who should be questioning their values, not clinging to outdated practices." Frank's jaw tightened, but Naomi wasn't finished. "If you have specific concerns, I suggest you bring them to the independent review board we've established. But let me be clear, this company will not take a single step backward. If anyone has a problem with that, they're free to seek employment elsewhere." The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was almost palpable. Several managers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to speak. Frank sat back down, his face a mask of frustration. But Naomi knew she had sent a message. Resistance would not be tolerated, not when so much was at stake. Later that evening, Naomi returned to her office to find an email waiting for her. It was from Ethan Reynolds, the journalist who had first recorded the viral video. The subject line read, "Follow-up." Naomi opened it, curious about what Ethan had to say. His message was short, but intriguing. "Miss Carter, I've been following your progress with Meridian Airlines, and I have to say, it's inspiring. But I wanted to share something with you that might be of interest. I've been investigating complaints from former employees of Meridian, and what I've found is disturbing. Let me know if you'd like to discuss further." Naomi sat back in her chair, her mind racing. The systemic issues at Meridian were deeper than she'd initially realized. The reforms she'd implemented were a start, but Ethan's message suggested there was still more to uncover, and possibly more people who needed to be held accountable. She replied immediately, requesting a meeting with Ethan the following day. As she hit send, her phone buzzed with a text from Michelle. "PR numbers are through the roof. Investors are starting to return. You're turning this ship around." Naomi smiled briefly, but her focus was already elsewhere. Fixing Meridian's public image was one thing. Fixing its foundation was another. If Ethan's investigation revealed more rot within the company, Naomi knew she couldn't rest until it was exposed and dealt with. The next morning, Naomi met Ethan at a small cafe in the heart of the city. He looked more confident than the last time she'd seen him, his journalist instincts clearly sharpened by the success of his video. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "I wasn't sure if this was something you'd want to pursue, but after everything you've done so far, I thought you'd want to know." Naomi opened the folder, her eyes scanning the documents inside. Employee testimonials, internal emails, and detailed accounts of misconduct painted a grim picture of Meridian's past. There were allegations of racial and gender discrimination, unfair labor practices, and a pattern of ignoring complaints from marginalized employees. "How did you get all this?" Naomi asked, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath it. "Former employees," Ethan replied. "Once they saw what you were doing, they felt safe enough to come forward. They wanted their stories to be heard." Naomi nodded, closing the folder carefully. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "Thank you for bringing it to me. I'll make sure these voices aren't ignored." Ethan smiled faintly. "I had a feeling you would." As Naomi left the cafe, the weight of the folder in her hands felt heavier than it should have. The stories inside weren't just complaints. They were a call to action. Naomi had already begun transforming the company, but this new information made one thing clear. The fight was far from over. This wasn't just about fixing Meridian's future anymore. It was about reckoning with its past. Naomi returned to her office, the folder from Ethan resting on her desk like an anchor. She flipped through its contents again, reading each account more carefully this time. The stories were haunting. Employees passed over for promotions despite stellar performance reviews. Others subjected to inappropriate comments from supervisors, and many whose complaints disappeared into a bureaucratic void. As she read, a deeper truth crystallized in Naomi's mind. Meridian's problem wasn't just about one flight attendant, or even one culture. It was about a system designed to protect itself at the expense of its people. Changing the airline's public face wasn't enough. The rot had to be cut out completely. Naomi reached for her phone and dialed Mark Jensen. He picked up on the second ring. "Naomi, what's on your mind?" "We have a bigger problem," she said, cutting straight to the point. "I just reviewed evidence of systemic discrimination within Meridian. Past cases that were ignored or swept under the rug. I need to know if any legal liabilities could come back to haunt us." Mark paused for a moment before responding. "If these issues weren't addressed properly, and from the sound of it they weren't, there's potential for lawsuits. You're opening a Pandora's box, Naomi." "I don't care about Pandora's box," she replied sharply. "I care about doing what's right. Draft a plan for a full internal investigation. We'll be transparent about the findings, no matter how bad they are." Mark hesitated. "You're sure about this? Transparency can backfire if the public sees it as an admission of guilt." Naomi's voice didn't waver. "We can't rebuild this company on half-truths, Mark. Do it." By the next morning, the investigation was underway. Naomi assembled a task force of external auditors and legal experts, giving them full access to Meridian's records. She also issued a statement to the press, acknowledging the investigation and committing to releasing its findings. "We can't move forward as a company without first addressing the mistakes of our past," Naomi's statement read. "This is not about blame. It's about accountability. Meridian Airlines is committed to transparency and to rebuilding trust with our employees and customers alike." The response was swift and polarizing. Some praised Naomi's courage, hailing her as a visionary leader willing to tackle the tough issues. Others, particularly those within the industry, questioned the wisdom of airing Meridian's dirty laundry. But Naomi wasn't swayed by the criticism. She knew this was the only way to create lasting change. A week later, the preliminary findings of the investigation were delivered to Naomi in a sealed report. As she read through it, her suspicions were confirmed. Systemic discrimination had been rampant within Meridian for years, enabled by a culture of indifference and complicity. Worse, several senior managers, some of whom still worked for the company, were directly implicated in covering up complaints. Naomi convened an emergency meeting with her leadership team. The room was tense as she laid the report on the table and began to speak. "This is the reality we're facing," she said, her voice calm but steely. "The problems at Meridian run deeper than we thought. Fixing this will take more than policies and training. We need to clean house." Michelle shifted uneasily in her seat. "Do you mean firing people?" Naomi nodded. "Exactly. The people responsible for these cover-ups, the ones who allowed this culture to thrive, they have no place here. We'll replace them with leaders who share our vision and values." There were murmurs of agreement, though Naomi could see the uncertainty in some of her team's faces. Change was never easy. especially when it involved dismantling the old guard. But Naomi had no intention of wavering. The next morning, Naomi addressed the company in an all-staff meeting. Employees filled the large conference room and logged in remotely from across the country, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Naomi stood at the front, her posture confident and her expression serious. "Over the past few weeks, we've made great strides in transforming this company," she began. "But transformation isn't just about looking forward. It's about addressing the past. The investigation we launched has uncovered systemic issues within Meridian, issues that should never have been allowed to exist." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I want to be clear. This isn't about assigning blame to individuals. It's about accountability. We cannot build a better future without acknowledging the harm that was done and ensuring it never happens again." Naomi outlined the steps she was taking: the immediate termination of managers implicated in cover-ups, reparations for affected employees, and the creation of a permanent internal review board to oversee workplace equity. "I know these changes are difficult," Naomi concluded, "but they are necessary. We can't undo the past, but we can make sure it never repeats itself. And together we can create a company we can all be proud of." The room erupted into applause. Some employees stood, clapping enthusiastically, while others nodded with quiet approval. Naomi scanned the crowd, her heart steady but her mind racing. She had won over many, but the hardest battles were yet to come. That evening, Naomi received a text from Ethan. "The former employees who came forward saw your statement. They're grateful. One of them called you a real game changer. Thought you should know." Naomi smiled, a rare flicker of warmth breaking through her usual resolve. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt a small sense of accomplishment. The road ahead was long, but she was beginning to see the impact of her work. She looked out the window of her office, the city lights stretching endlessly before her. This wasn't just about fixing Meridian. It was about setting a standard for what corporate leadership could and should be. And Naomi Carter wasn't stopping until she got it right. Months passed, and the transformation of Meridian Airlines was nothing short of revolutionary. Naomi's bold decisions, from the internal investigation to the rebranding and sweeping policy changes, had turned the struggling airline into a beacon of accountability and innovation. The public, once skeptical, now embraced the new Meridian. The story of Naomi Carter, the woman who had been humiliated on a flight and then turned that humiliation into a catalyst for change, had become legendary. The airline's first annual report under Naomi's leadership showed record-breaking improvements. Customer satisfaction ratings were at an all-time high, employee retention rates had surged, and profits were steadily climbing. More importantly, the company's culture had undergone a seismic shift. Employees now spoke openly in meetings, unafraid of retaliation. Complaints were addressed swiftly and transparently, and diversity in leadership positions had doubled. But Naomi wasn't focused on the numbers as she prepared for her biggest announcement yet. Standing in a packed conference room filled with reporters, employees, and stakeholders, she took a deep breath before stepping up to the podium. Cameras flashed as she adjusted the microphone and began to speak. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "When I first stepped into this role, it wasn't under ideal circumstances. What began as a deeply personal experience became an opportunity to create something bigger, a company that stands for fairness, respect, and inclusion." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I know this is just the beginning. Meridian Airlines isn't just an airline anymore. It's a movement to prove that businesses can succeed by doing the right thing." Naomi smiled, a rare but genuine expression. "And with that in mind, I'm excited to announce the launch of the Meridian Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting equity and opportunity in workplaces across all industries. The foundation will fund initiatives for diversity training, workplace reform, and mentorship programs for underrepresented communities." The crowd erupted into applause, and Naomi's heart swelled with pride. This wasn't just about Meridian anymore. It was about setting a precedent, showing that change was possible and necessary. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Naomi found herself standing alone on the tarmac, watching one of the newly branded planes take off into the twilight sky. The sight brought a quiet sense of satisfaction, a reminder of how far she and the airline had come. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Michelle. "The Foundation announcement is already trending. Meridian movement is everywhere. Congrats, boss." Naomi smiled and tucked the phone away. She didn't need to check the hashtags or read the headlines. She knew what they would say. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to pause and reflect. The path to this moment had been anything but easy. She'd faced humiliation, resistance, and impossible odds. But she had also found allies, reclaimed her power, and created something that would outlast her. A legacy of change. Naomi Carter wasn't just the woman who had bought the airline. She was the woman who had transformed it. And as she watched the plane disappear into the horizon, she knew this was only the beginning of her journey to change the world. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Thanks for watching.